Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again today because we've got a special guest in the house. But before I introduce him, I have a quick announcement to make, an invitation actually. So as many of you know, the AAO, American Academy of Orthodontics meeting is coming up at the end of April in Philadelphia. It's a great show. We highly recommend attending for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because Polaris will be holding a pre-conference workshop and a cocktail hour Thursday, April 24th. That's going to be from 4:30 to 6:30 in room 201B of the Pennsylvania Convention Center. Now, it's going to be a meaningful workshop because really it's a discussion centered around you. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that the workshop is intended to be interactive. And it'll be led by Polaris experts who'll give you actionable insights on how to get the highest value from your business. And that's really whether you're looking to drive growth or whether you're thinking about an exit in the coming year or even 5 to 7 years. We want to plan ahead, right? But in either case, you'll leave with a game plan and the right resources to fuel those decisions. So don't miss it. To reserve your seat and, of course, a couple of cocktails, be sure to register by visiting polarishealthcarepartners.com/AAO. All right, now we can get to today's topic, and that's about the number one pain point in all of dentistry and group practice. Anybody have a guess? Yeah, we don't have to guess because we already know that it's recruitment and retention. And of course, that's not limited to dental, it impacts all of healthcare. Well, we're really grateful for the feedback we get from our clients who come to us for solutions on that. We want to share some best practices. So, in order to do that, here behind the mic with me today is not only a guest with a wealth of knowledge on this topic, but a respected colleague, practice growth expert, and founder of the Next Level Executive, our friend Perrin DesPortes. And Perrin is going to chat with me today on how best to position yourself and attract great associates, how to motivate them, and of course, retain them. Perrin, welcome back to the podcast.
Jamie, we're a couple of minutes in and we haven't even talked coffee yet. I mean, you're going cocktails right out the chute. Who's writing all this stuff for you now? The body's not even cold, you know? Have I been gone that long? Good grief, man.
We've thrown that coffee right out the window.
Is it a note-taking episode? I mean, what
Always.
the heck? I don't want y'all to get one of those explicit ratings by any stretch, so I'll try to tone it down. But on a serious note, it's great to see you. It's good to be back with you. And I have been looking forward to us getting together on the show today. It really is an honor to be with you.
Likewise. We're so fortunate to have you. Glad to have you. And I want to hear first about what you've been up to.
I've been able to fill an honest 8-hour workday lately, I'd like to think. Yeah, Next Level Executive, the launch of that around January 1st was great right out the chutes. And the coaching program that I've been able to build through the last half of the year last year at Polaris, and certainly the first handful of weeks as we start 2025, has been really rewarding and really fulfilling. And it's a segment of the market that I wasn't able to really focus on previously. And it's really a compelling space. I think we can talk a little bit about that today. But, you know, for those people who are, I like to say, clinicians who own a practice, they're the people who have solid systems and processes that generate consistent results. They have tremendous clinical skill sets and can do a lot of advanced clinical type procedures. And they probably also make a stable and healthy amount of income, and they're wondering what's next. And as you and I well know, those who start to wonder what's next typically conclude that what's next is an additional location, and they tend to stumble off the reservation and start making short-term decisions that have long-term consequences, and they get into trouble right away. I don't think that group practice is the right thing for everybody, but I certainly think that it's a compelling opportunity over the course of the coming decade or more, and something that's worth consideration for the right people who've achieved practice mastery. And I'm really fortunate that I've got about 15 people in the program who are at that level and are looking to potentially take the next step. They're very collaborative and frankly a lot of fun. So I couldn't ask for anything more of my transition out of Polaris. The collaboration that DeWalker and I had, and certainly the launch of Next Level, has been very rewarding for me. So very excited about the year to come and the years beyond that.
Well, congratulations. We're always happy to hear about your success and lucky to partner with you. And I'm excited to watch you grow. But looking towards today's topic, and you mentioned a couple of things about this in growing practices, and looking toward the topic of recruitment, growth, retention, motivation, all of that in terms of associates. I mean, I know from your experience here at Polaris and, of course, well before, docs want answers on how to fix this problem of recruitment and retention, right? And we've seen people just hit a wall. And I know it can really incapacitate a business if you lose good people. So I know sometimes you have to pause and realize you can't carry it all on your own shoulders. But where do we start? Like, what do docs need to be thinking about in terms of attracting, motivating, retaining? Like, where's a good kickoff point there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a continuum, right? There are a lot of different branches on the tree. There are a lot of different decision points to consider. And it's not a one size fits all type of an approach or even an ending philosophy, I would say. So let's maybe take it from the jump and start with the candidate, if you will, that I left off with. And that is somebody who's built a successful practice, achieving good clinical outcomes, a healthy level of personal income, and the thing runs pretty seamlessly from an operational construct. So before we even possibly start contemplating adding additional locations, we want to start to think about ways for us as founders to build a business and not simply have a practice. I hate to put it this way, but if you're a successful clinician who owns a practice, you have a very high-paying job. And
Right.
by that, I mean that if you want to take the family on a trip to Europe for 4 weeks, the business probably is going to stall. It's not going to be able to remain open the whole time. It doesn't continue to generate revenue or profit in your absence. And I think we have to be eyes wide open about that, because the first transition that happens is when we start to bring on an associate. Okay, how are we going to feed them? Like literally and figuratively. Like we think we've reached a level of volume where the business needs an associate. And I think it's prudent to start to build a business that's not dependent upon our clinical skill set alone for its existence. So the first thing we have to do is candidly squirrel away a lot of cash. All right. Because your first associate, or any subsequent associate for that matter, is not an expense, it's an investment. And if you see those as being one and the same, you're not dialed into the difference in them. It is absolutely investing in them, and it's absolutely investing in your future growth. So if you're going to do that, where does the money come from? The first way I think about this is to ask the founder in this situation, let's be honest with one another. What's your personal standard of living? What are your expenses on the home front? And are your expenses on the home front, for the most part, fixed, meaning difficult to change or scale back, scale down? And are they at a level that necessitates you pulling all of the cash out of the practice to fund it? If the answer is yes, we have a high expense level at home, and it requires me to pull all the money out of the practice to fund it, then you have no margin for error. So we've got to scale down our personal expenses to create some buffer to allow us to build up some cash on the sidelines. Because the minute we hire an associate to come on board, that associate is probably going to start picking up some of our clinical workload. And they don't do that for free. We have to pay them to do that. And when we pay them to do that, it comes out of our back pocket. And if you don't have a fallback position and a personal cash reserve to weather that storm, it immediately puts you in conflict with your family. And that's just a terrible way to start this growth process, whether it's additional locations or associates. The next piece of it really is the business growth standpoint. And you've heard me say on this podcast in years past, you've heard DeWalker talk about it, Aiden and Mark as well. And that is that if your marketing plan, if your marketing company, if your marketing program or approach is not generating in excess of a bare minimum of 20 new patients per month per full-time doctor, then you're not even treading water. So when we start thinking about, we typically make the decision to bring on our first associate through gut feel alone. And I would tell you that's a bad way to make a decision in this context. So cash is the first piece. Do you have a fallback position? The second thing is, do you feel confident about the upward trajectory in terms of growth of new patients to warrant future volume that this new associate is going to take off of your shoulders, but also be able to sustain for themselves and the practice moving forward? So I'll take a beat there because that was a little bit of a lengthy response, but it obviously has a lot of tangents to it.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And going back to some of those prior podcasts, we kind of drive home the importance of having a good strategic plan. What's your vision for the next 5 to 7 years? What's your vision for 10 years? So you can't be out on vacation going, oh, shoot, I'm losing money. Maybe I should have planned ahead for this. But obviously, some people handle it that way, and that's not a sustainable program. So what we're getting back to is how do I want to plan for this? What do I need to be thinking about in terms of that initial contemplation when I'm ready to hire an associate? So
Yeah.
thank you. You covered preparation very well.
I think you and I have both seen far too many people make it up as they go along. And even though this is a situation that resides within your four walls and under your roof, being your first associate, making it up as you go along is fraught with danger, and I don't want to say it guarantees failure, but more often than not, that's the case. And it puts too much of a heightened level of anxiety between a young associate coming in, hoping to plant their own flag versus, what the founder wants to get out of the practice. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're looking at, it's time, I'm going along with my strategic plan. I know I need to add an associate. So looking at that by itself, how do we make ourselves attractive? Like, how do we differentiate ourselves and find the right candidate? Because we know there are a lot of options out there right now.
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of options out there. And I think the important thing for our audience here is to embrace a couple of things. One, if you are going to start adding associates to your growing practice or to your growing group, the first discipline to be in is that recruiting is a full-time game with constant pedal pressure. I think the mistake that far too many people make is they start recruiting based on need. And I learned early on in my career at Patterson that you need to answer that question to yourself with the response that there is always going to be a need, whether it is on our volition or some associate tendering their resignation or abruptly resigning or something like that. But in a growth business, you're never not recruiting. All right. You're never not recruiting. I know that's terrible English, but it's easy to remember. So we're always in the discipline of constantly recruiting. The second thing is when we recruit, and if we recruit based on need, our first resource is typically a recruiter. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but the likelihood is that a recruiter has a list of candidates, or a job site like Indeed or Glassdoor or any of the others are going to furnish a list of candidates of people who are currently unemployed who want to be employed. And maybe that's okay, but maybe they're unemployed for a reason. So, and again, a growing business, are you recruiting for C plus B minus, or are you recruiting for B plus A minus? There's a difference. And
Right.
I would tell you that the likelihood is that we need to open up the envelope and acknowledge that there are many associates who are currently employed with DSOs or otherwise, but they are not in their forever home. And this is not going to be their last stop in their employment career. So if we don't have any access to them, if we don't connect with them on social media, if we don't connect with them at local dental society meetings or whatever else, then we are shutting off arguably the most attractive segment of the entire associate marketplace. And we're never even getting a chance to promote what makes us different. I'll finally get to answer your question here, but you got to do something more than just saying, I'm going to post an ad, right? And so when we think about what differentiates us and what makes us attractive to someone, again, it is a handful of things. One, all too often, we promote a compensation rate. I pay 30% of collections, you pay 32%, and somebody else pays 28% of net adjusted production. And like, okay, fine. Like we're dueling comp rates here, right? Comp rates don't matter. What matters is personal income. And personal income is a function of the comp rate and the volume of dentistry that you do. So if you are simply promoting the fact that you pay 32% of collections to everybody who's willing to sit down and interview with you, 32% of what? Like, what is a typical first year, second year, third year associate going to do in your practice or in your group? And the likelihood is that that could be substantially different on volume than it would for a would-be competitor. So you can't spend a comp rate, you can spend income. So translate the comp rate into the level of income that you would expect that associate to earn in their first, second, and third year with you. Beyond that, I believe that people who go to medical school and dental school are motivated. They are growth-oriented individuals. I mean, heck, think about the schooling they've been through, and they've been at the top of their class all along the way, right? So these are achievement-oriented individuals that have a growth mindset, and they want to be better next year than they are today. So if you are recruiting, and especially if you are recruiting somebody who is currently employed, sure, you want to talk about their level of personal income, but you want to talk about how, under your tutelage, your mentorship, and your doctor development program, they are going to excel to a higher level of clinical efficacy at a faster rate than they would on their own. And this is the aspect of being an integral member of a championship team. And if you can get that across to them, then I think you appeal to their mindset around mastery and really becoming, with an advanced clinical skill set, a master at their craft. And to me, that's a really compelling value proposition. And it also creates some level of alignment between you and the candidate that you're looking to bring on board.
Well, sure. And even bringing that back to a point of what are you investing in them? This has to be part of a broader presentation that goes far beyond compensation, like onboarding. What does your first 30 days look like? That 30, 60, 90 that we all plan for in business, right? What about culture? Who's going to mentor you? How are we going to grow your skill sets? But like you said, becoming a master of your craft, it's a lot more than compensation.
You said, the onboarding plan, and I didn't acknowledge that, but you're 100% correct. And I think if you put yourself, like you and I have been in the workforce for a while now, but like it's hard to go back and remember your first real job, right? And you know, it's sort of nerve-wracking when you go into it because you've either been in an academic environment or an environment where sort of everything was provided for you and it was a little bit cushy or something like that. And now we're playing for real, right? And I think that 30, 60, 90 onboarding plan is critically important because it plays to a degree of security and confidence in the mindset of the applicant that is critically important to assuage or to make them feel comfortable making the decision to go with you. But I would also tell you the other thing about a 90-day onboarding plan is that, hey, Jamie, this is an evaluation period for me and for you.
Right.
Okay. I think you're great. I like what I've seen in an interview. You present really well. but I'm not going to know until you've been in our system, in our practice, working with our team for those 90 days. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to make the decision within those 90 days to restart this interview process. I'm setting expectations of this is a performance culture. It's not just a show up, throw it in neutral and glide for the next 3 decades of your career. Like, we're here to get something done, right? And I think setting that expectation early on, even in the interview process, is super important.
Well, absolutely, and I think you touched on looking at it from the other side of the window. What is that experience like for the new associate? And if there's not a fit after that 30, 60, 90 days, you get in there and the culture doesn't fit, something is off, you know that you're not gonna be able to grow together, that it's time to start over,
Yeah.
obviously. But as part of that, attracting the right associate and finding out if you can work well together, how do you humbly talk about your team that's so amazing that everyone's going to be a great fit? I think that's got to be a part of that standing out piece, doesn't it? Like, how do you talk about your team and your practice and get that message across to candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a way to humbly brag about your growth and prior achievements that creates confidence in the mind of somebody. And there's an old saying that, again, I learned at Patterson in my early career, and that's that A's hire A's and B's hire C's. Okay, so A's hire A players and B's hire C players. And it goes both ways to kind of play off of what you just said, right? So if we're interviewing somebody and we say, hey, this is the growth in revenue of our business, or here's the last 10 to 20 years and the number of dots on the map in terms of location count growth, or here's the growth of our first year, second year, third year associates, and we're showing that everything's kind of the arrow points up and to the right, so to speak. We're not doing it from a braggadocious standpoint. What we're trying to convey is that we are a growing business that's going somewhere. And that the unstated question is, do you want to be a part of that? And so I think when we talk about onboarding, when we talk about doctor development, we talk about income generation, we talk about the time and tenure of the staff and or mentors involved, all of that starts to kind of seal the deal from a 360-degree perspective. And if yours is a group where you're going to say, when you come on board, I'm going to put our longest tenured senior and most capable treatment coordinator on your team. I'm going to put my longest tenured and most capable assistant on your team. I'm going to surround you with A players. I'm going to feed you new patients. I've got a doctor development plan. I'm going to assign a capable mentor to you who has trod your path before. What I'm basically saying is that I'm going to create the playing field for you to be great. If this thing fails, it ain't going to be on account of me and my team. All right.
Right.
And again, you don't have to be braggadocious or intimidating about that. If delivered appropriately, it should create confidence in the mind of the applicant that says, I want to be part of that team. I can see myself excelling in that environment. This is a place that if I'm lucky enough to get a job here, I can stay for my career. And I think all of that is part of the total package that doesn't necessarily appear in an offer letter, and I think it's if you have a deck, a recruiting deck, a pitch deck that kind of tells the story of your business, then it separates you from the competitors and probably makes you a more attractive business that somebody's going to want to be a part of.
Well, certainly. And there's such a high level of comfort, and I'll even say security from that respect when you go in and you know that you're going to be supported with the best resources right off the bat. And speaking of maybe offering what your peers don't and setting yourself aside, let's talk a minute about ownership intentions. Like, what about equity plans when you're trying to attract associates?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that people apply to dental school because they want to be owners of businesses and they believe that there's still that opportunity for them to be. And I would tell you that I'm more bullish or optimistic about that outcome in the coming 5 to 10 years than I ever have been. And I think that there are obviously several different ways to solve for that. It could be a straight buy-in, it could be an earn-in. We talk a lot about profits interest units and restricted stock units, two unbelievably valuable methodologies that Polaris basically has a corner in the market on. And I think those applications, or a hybrid for that matter, of the two, can be tremendous outcomes that are not, they're customizable. I was going to say they're not in the box solutions like the business, the practice, and the associate doesn't have to fit in the Polaris box to make it applicable. They're highly customizable, and I think that gives the founder a lot of options. The other thing about this is, when we talk about equity and ownership, I believe that owners show up early and they stay late. It's just a different level of commitment, and it's a different mindset that you never turn off. It's not a matter of just driving to work and saying, "Well, I'm an owner." No, you go to sleep with it the night before. You wake up with it in the morning. You're never not with an owner hat on. And I think that creates a level of stability. I think it aligns interests, and I think it creates more advantageous outcomes than the counter to that. And obviously, it goes without saying that not only do owners show up early and stay late, but they stay for longer over decades of a time. So the worst thing we can do is build a group practice with a high degree of provider churn that is really problematic for the continuity of care. It's detrimental to the continuity of profitability, and it creates a level of chaos that typically sits in the lap of the founder because he or she is the one who's typically the chief recruiter. And you go back to that kind of spinning turnstile effect of constantly having to recruit based on need. And that's just a very, very difficult position to find yourself in. And I think equity and ownership goes a long way to solving all of that. So I'm a firm believer in it. I think it's something that you shouldn't enter into lightly. I don't think you should enter into it as a standpoint of, if I offer equity, it will fix all of my problems. It won't. I think you need to go through an exploratory process to really determine what you want out of the business. And if you feel like allowing people to buy in or earn in will help complement what you want out of the business, then it can be the right solution. But it's a big commitment on both sides, for sure.
Oh, it sure is. And both you and I have spoken at length with our associate equity executive, Mark Flock, on this podcast and covered it, many, many times over. But there are always more questions because it's never a one size fits all. But what we do know is that it's a really attractive option if that's in your strategic plan to cover with new associates. So definitely attractive for them in terms of that package.
Yeah, Mark's a pro at it too. Sorry to cut you off, but I don't say that as any reflection on me, by any stretch. I've spent a lot of time with him, and he obviously his the dirty little secret is Mark's probably delivered more of these associate equity models than I have through my years, and he's great at it. He's also very patient, and I think for your audience that's contemplating that, when we're talking about associate equity models, be it buy-in or earn-in, there's the legal aspect of it, employment contracts, operating agreements, award agreements, and all that. There's the financial reporting and accounting aspect of it. There's the financial model itself to determine the vehicle to allow them to buy in or earn in, which are kind of the three legs to the stool. But the other one that Mark plays specifically is the role of kind of orchestra conductor. For somebody in your audience to say, I'm the founder of a group dental practice and I want to create an associate equity model and I'm going to be the one to direct all the traffic, you don't even know the questions to ask. Mark
Exactly.
does, and he can sit in the middle and kind of herd all the cats to make this thing come to a conclusion and present it logically to the associates involved. And I think that's critically important because it's such an opaque process with so many unknowns that people, they don't go through it as often as Mark does. So his experience in having kind of seen it all truly is completely invaluable.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And he really gets a look behind the curtain on what these groups are looking to grow. Like, how are we going to make this happen? What's the strategic plan look like? And to that end, I'll ask you, like, how do you think about sustaining that growth? I've just added an associate. Now what? If I'm looking to sustain growth in terms of that associate personally and professionally, or looking to sustain growth of the business, how do I think about those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to a multi-pronged approach. One is the philosophy and commitment around constant recruiting. You should want to be connecting with people in the marketplace who are gainfully employed now, who are not owners in businesses probably. And the best thing you could tell them is that we are a growth business. We are constantly looking to add top tier associates who are willing to embrace and take advantage of our doctor development plan and want to be part of something bigger in the future. Now, that type of a pitch, I would hope, would appeal to 95% of the associate population out there. So if it does, the best thing you can say is, we don't have an opening right now, but I'd like to stay in contact with you because I've enjoyed this conversation at a cocktail party, a dental society meeting, email exchange over Facebook or a web platform or something like social media, that kind of stuff. So you're building a network of ideally 8 to 10 potential candidates for the next time you have an opening, and you've accelerated the ice-breaking get to know you part of the interview process. The next thing is being dialed in with your marketing campaign, like our marketing agency, like we talked about, to continue to drive greater levels of volume. If you're networking with would-be associates and you're confident around the future growth of your business, the next component would be the business development side, which is the buy or build in terms of additional locations to expand the footprint. And if you feel like that is progressing nicely, it's almost like trying to line up two concurrent processes that magically meet a year down the road, of finding a practice to possibly close on in a given area, knowing that you've already had several conversations with would-be associates who would be interested in that area. And magically, the two come together at the right point in time to make 1 + 1 = 3. And, the last thing I'll say is the role of chief clinical officer is critically important. I know that you guys working with Vivek and Steve are doing one-on-one doctor development and coaching, probably literally over the shoulder type coaching, which I think is invaluable for people who haven't been able to build their own program. But obviously, having associates who are far above average in their clinical skill abilities and their development path is taking greater advantage of the same level of chair time. So that provider lift, that productivity, we know that 50 cents out of every dollar drops to the bottom line usually in that situation. So it's a tremendous service. Our next level group was in town last week here in Charlotte for a chief clinical officer workshop that's completely different than what Vivek and Steve are doing, but it sort of centers around the same thing. Like, this is a business of dentistry. Yeah, I went to dental school. Yeah, I'm the founder and we're all dentists. So what's the big deal, right? Everybody ought to know what they're doing. Well, no, that's not actually the case. And if you're the founder of a group, there's a massive liability and a compliance aspect that goes along with having a sound standard of care and clinical philosophy that is documented, and one that is scalable if you're going to build a bigger business. And a lot of that, again, comes back to your doctor development plan. So I think if you're doing all of that concurrently, you're probably going to get the rising tide that lifts all boats, and it's probably going to be a very great journey for you as the founder.
Absolutely. Agree. So if we had to recap here today, what would be your best advice?
If you're early stage, if you're solo dentist in a solo practice, for example, you've got to create cash buffer to allow you to invest in your first associate and get that person combat effective in a way that doesn't put you in financial conflict with your family. So cash is critically important before you even decide to start the journey. The next piece is, do you have confidence around the marketing lift and greater need of clinical services for new patients coming in. The third thing is, if you're recruiting, how are you going to differentiate yourself from every other practice group or otherwise that is recruiting? And that should be taking a longer term approach, like I've mentioned in several instances. Fourth piece is the necessity for a doctor development plan. I mean, you can't take an average associate or somebody right out of school or residency and allow them to plod along. You've got to get more out of them than what they can get out of themselves in the same amount of time. And then the last thing is, I think the equity piece for those who merit it or who have earned it to become partners in the business and create stability for the long haul. So all of that kind of put together on a continuum that could be a handful of years to a handful of decades in the making probably sets you up for a lot of future success, however big of the business you want to build.
Yeah, well put. Well put. And putting those meaningful pieces in place to get the right people in the right positions. Well, thanks, Perrin. It was such a pleasure being back behind the mic with you today, and I know our listeners feel the same way. I know there's a lot to consider in putting together a great recruitment and retention plan. So thank you again for your time and your insights.
It's my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope it won't be so long before the next time, right?
No way. We'll have you back soon. Well, we appreciate you. Since we know that today's topic is the number one pain point for most of you, and we only briefly touched on what you need to be thinking about to remedy those difficulties. As Perrin said, there are a lot of layers to this. There's a lot to consider in terms of presenting a compelling package to the right associate. And Polaris is, of course, here to help. So please reach out and ask about our Partnership Pathways program. We'd be happy to help you. If you'd like to schedule some time to explore how we can work to resolve those challenges, or if you want to learn about any of Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic you want to learn about that we haven't covered yet, go ahead and send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting the website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.